You're watching Business AM. This is Metropole Television. We're closing the year 2020 as we usher in 2021. Now, 2020, a year that has been described as a COVID-19 stricken year for any economy locally and globally. Now, according to the World Bank, despite the key advancements the country has made in its political, structural and economic reforms, its key development challenges still include poverty, inequality, climate change, continued weak private sector investment, and the vulnerability of the economy to the internal and external shocks. Now, this year's real gross domestic product (GDP) growth was projected to hit a high of 6.3%, which has decelerated to a low of 0.6% in 2020 in the latest review by Treasury. In what has been highly attributed to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, there are fears that if it takes longer than expected to bring the COVID-19 pandemic under control, GDP could contract further in 2020 and see a delay in the projected recovery to 5.2% growth in 2021. In a year that saw the government adopt unprecedented measures to cushion the economy from the effects of the pandemic, including reduction of corporation tax, value-added tax, VAT, and pay-as-you-earn payee, the economy witnessed massive job losses and redundancy declarations from the corporate sector that saw almost 2 million Kenyans lose their jobs and smaller businesses wiped off the Kenyan scene as the pandemic reached further. Now, the country's debt burden also shot during this period as the tax money ran into deficits close to 65.5 billion in the first 10 months of the year, compounded by reduced economic activities as a result of the pandemic. Treasury ran into the market to plug the budget holes caused by the pandemic, a factor that saw Kenya's debt level shoot to more than 7.5 trillion shillings, drawing ever closer to the debt ceiling of 9 trillion set by the Treasury Office. Question being therefore, how has the economy fared under the COVID-19 pandemic, and what are our chances of growth in 2021? To close the year for us, we're joined by George Menga and also Wahome Ngari, who are going to tell us exactly our chances for 2021 and what 2020 has been pretty much. Now, the first question is, to what extent has the COVID-19 pandemic affected Kenya's economic growth chances in 2020, with the Treasury revised to 0.6%? George, good morning, sir.
Morning, Elijah. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Can you take off with that question, therefore?
Elijah, remember at the beginning of this year, when COVID did not reach our shores, Treasury and IMF and even the World Bank had projected that our economy was going to grow at between 5.8 to 6.3%, which was a very good outlook of the economy for this financial year. And remember last year, I think we did around 5.3%. In the backdrop of that, I think there was that risk already that we already foresee, because at the beginning of this year we already had COVID in China and other countries, but it was yet to visit Kenya. So with COVID visiting us, you've seen the ravages that it has done to the economy. Our economists and the Bretton Woods institutions have reviewed our growth prospects downwards to as low as 0.6%. In fact, I dare say that our economy might grow by a negative digits, Elijah, come 2021. But that notwithstanding, Elijah, I think Kenyan economy has held fort. We are seeing resilience in the economy, albeit with some sectors or some industries being affected worse than the others. If you look at agriculture has not been affected that much. I think agriculture is likely to grow by a small margin in 2021. But you look at tourism, we are going to record negative growth in tourism, Elijah. Same to manufacturing. And even banking sector. I think last time we were with you, we were talking about the banking sector, and most of the top tier banks have recorded between 6 and almost 30% reduction in the profitability for 2020. So in a nutshell, Elijah, our outlook for 2020 is not very good. In fact, 0.6 I think, is quite optimistic. We might record even a negative growth in 2020. But come 2021, and with the prospects of the vaccine now out there, I think it will be dependent upon the government of Kenya to run as fast as they can to ensure that we get this vaccine and address the critical masses in the economy, that the most risky demographics in the economy, that is the health workers, the much older population, so that as we go into 2021, then we can go into the new year with some confidence that we can be out there and roll the wheels of the economy as we face the new year. So 2020, as it were, I think we are going to record very minimal growth or even negative growth. But 2021, it will depend on how the government arranges its months, or how the government responds to the vaccines that have been introduced to the market, and how it pushes its agenda into 2021. I think the most important or the most critical aspect, the most important success factor the government should look into is first, public health, and two, how do you jumpstart an economy that has gone into recession, Elijah? Those are the two critical issues that I think the government must sit down and address. I've not seen government paper on that so far, or a cabinet paper on that so far.
Yes.
But I believe before the end of the year, we should have a blueprint on how we are going to get out of this pandemic, Elijah.
Yes, which is George, which is what I want to ask you about this economic recovery strategy that we already do know has been floated. That's the only paper that we're actually seeing around. I'm going to come back to you on that. Let me first go to Mr. Wahome Ngari. I mean, for you, how much has the COVID-19 pandemic been a thorn to Kenya's economy in 2020?
I think we've been in denial if we don't acknowledge and accept that there has been a lot of effect, very devastating.
Yes.
We have seen it in all fronts of the economy. Just like George said, tourism is on its knees. Even local tourism is on its knees. Manufacturing has been very, very badly affected. The financial sector has been affected. Now, the only people who don't seem to have been affected are politicians. I don't understand how. Because in their outlook, the focus is not the economy. The focus is not the economy. The focus is elsewhere. And you know, we are only going to win if our focus goes to the right place. And if we don't focus on the pocket, we are going to have serious problems in this country.
Pretty much. Let me go back to George. That's what has been the introduction our economy has fared in 2020. Now, George, let's talk about it, therefore. I mean, when you look at the key sectors of the economy, and I would like to start with tourism, which has been amongst the biggest contributors to our GDP. When you look at the way it's been affected, I mean, we're talking about reduction in even visa numbers we cleared 2020. That's in the 10 months over 2020 by 72%. I mean, where do we stand in that economic growth, if at all? We're going to read that number by Treasury and say it is 0.6%. Do you expect that tourism is again going to contribute further to that negative figure that you say you think we might be there?
Elijah, I hate being a prophet of doom, but tourism is likely not to perform well this year and a better part of next year.
Yes.
Remember, tourism is a factor of emotional comfort on the people who are visiting your country, and that comfort, as it is today, is not there. Remember, the last report that was issued by the United States of America, we were ranked at category 4 in terms of risk factor. And in fact, we were ranked with Tanzania, which has done very poorly in COVID-19 response. We were ranked with Burundi, and we were ranked with Uganda. So that sends out a message out there that in as much as we've tried our level best to contain this pandemic, we have not done much in terms of communicating our response to the outside world, so that they know that this is the much we've done, and we've done so much to ensure that we contain the community reinfections, as it were. So I project that tourism will start coming back probably in 2022 after we have addressed the vaccine, and the vaccine is widespread in the economy. But that notwithstanding, I project that the rest of the sectors will start responding positively to the vaccine news, Elijah. For example, the banking sector.
Yes.
The banking sector, I expect will bounce back in 2021. Remember, more 2020, but some of those got some growth in 2021. Same to manufacturing. Remember, it is the government's policy not to close the economy again, and they're trying as much as possible to see how they can open up the economy safely. And I think with that, the manufacturing sector is going to bounce back in terms of year-on-year growth. Same to education. I told you that agriculture has been resilient over this period, and we expect the same coming into next year. We've had challenges with the locust issues also, Elijah, as mentioned by the CS in charge of agriculture. But I expect that is something that the government can be able to manage as we go into 2021. So, in as much as we are going to record very minimal growth in 2020, I expect that in 2021 we might record at least between 3 to 4% GDP growth.
Yes.
From the sectors that I've mentioned.
Yes.
But tourism might start seeing positive growth probably in 2022 going into 2023, Elijah.
Yes, George, just before I bring in Wahome Ngari on exactly the bigger men and the bigger offices in the country that have been tasked with turning the economy around in 2021, let's go back a bit. We've seen a lot of numbers, George, on what our GDP growth was going to be this year. I mean, you and I started from 3.5, we went back to 2.5, went back to 1.9. Now we're talking about 0.6. There might be a negative that is coming from you. George, is it that hard for us to actually have a figure? Because I will take you back to what the Central Bank of Kenya Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge said this year, is that for him, he said, well, it might be more, 3.5%. But then Treasury comes up and tells us, well, no, it might not be more, actually 0.6%. Why don't we have a proper footing of what our chances are in terms of a growth this year?
I think Elijah, this year has been a unique year. Remember, the last time we had such a pandemic that was worldwide was in 1918, 1919.
Yes.
And I bet you know that probably most of us, if not all, were not born by then. So this is a new phenomenon, even to most governments. So I think most economies were what we call groping in the dark. They didn't know how this pandemic will pan out. What would be the likely economic impact of this pandemic into various economies? Remember, different economies have been impacted differently, and the biggest impacts have been on the mid-income economies and the less developed economies.
Yes.
So I would not want to check or say in terms of not giving us accurate figures, as it were. This is a new phenomenon that has come in at this time, and most people didn't know how to respond to it. You remember, even at the beginning of this pandemic, even the World Health Organization didn't know how to respond to it. The World Bank, the IMF didn't know how to respond to it. All of us are learning as we go along. But I think now we are almost 11 months or 10 months down the line into the pandemic, and we are starting to learn the nitty-gritties of the impact of this pandemic in various economies. Therefore, we should now start putting our act together, start doing our forecasts more accurately based on the fact that we already have. So I think 2021 we might have more accurate figures, or 2022. But 2020, I would not want to blame government for giving us various figures here and there. because it's a phenomenon that none of us had experienced, had prior experience before, Elijah.
Pretty much, Mr. Garuahome, let me bring you in on this as well. Yes, we have a new man in that office. I'm talking about the 3 officers that have been tasked with turning the economy around. Let's talk about that man, Mr. Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Talk about that man, Ukuru Yatani, and talk about the Central Bank of Kenya Governor, Dr. Patrick Njoroge. Do you think that these men have lived up to the task of moving the economy away from the effects of the COVID-19 and also getting the economy ready to fight the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic? What would be your assessment of these 3 major offices in terms of turning around the economy?
I think, to be fair, we started from a point when they were doing what needs to be done.
Yes.
Inflation in this country has been maintained very well for quite some time. The monetary policy, the interest rates have been maintained very well. So I think each of them have played their part. If we start with the governor, I think we've seen quite a bit of stability in the banking sector, in the financial sector. We've seen stability in the economy. When the CS into office, I think continuously he has also been not speaking a lot, but obviously doing quite a bit. And I think we can also give credit to the president. But the president, I think, has been between a rock and a hard place. He's got to play economy, he has to play politics. And yes. I think sometimes it's leaning on one side more than the other side. But they've tried. But just like Georgia has said, this year, we've been dealing with an enemy nobody can see, nobody knows about. We have asked the professionals to model how it's going to turn out, and they've also not been very clear. And we're not only talking here in Kenya, we're talking globally. I mean, there hasn't been even any economy where they've had certainty where it is going. People don't even tell when the first wave is over and the second wave is coming. I've had, I think in South Korea, they're talking about a 3rd wave. Now, we do not know whether we are anticipating a 3rd wave. Now, that a lot of that uncertainty, and the biggest challenge with, I think, COVID and its vagaries is the fear it has created. I think it's created just that much fear, which has interfered with everybody. Obviously, 11 months down the line, I think the fear is gone. But we still don't understand this issue. But we start seeing resilience, even from individuals, that people have more courage and more confidence in doing the things they are doing, or even looking at alternatives. And I think even as a nation, when we start looking at the alternatives, what are the viable sectors? Just I think George has mentioned, we can focus on agriculture and say, this is one area, yes, we have workers, but this is one area where we can actually drive our growth. Manufacturing, we're still a big brother in the East African region. And there's no doubt, even the other countries are still going to consume what they were consuming. Tourism may not work as magically as it has before. And this is not only for us. We've seen the effect at the moment, I think in Western Europe, people are trying to, there's a big discussion. We open skiing resorts or do we close skiing resorts? We've seen in the summer, the Southern Europe, they did get the numbers of millions of tourists that they get. And we've seen even locally, there has been quite a bit of effort to get local tourism to keep the facilities open. And I think if we continue from that point, as the vaccine finds its way, of course, the confusion in numbers even is coming with the vaccine. Yes. We have no idea how long it's going to take to get here.
Yes.
There are still debates in parts of the world. Is it working? Is it not working? We have not had a coherent policy here at home. As what are we doing? Who are we working with? How do we get it here? Yes, the British have started, and they started vaccinating people. The Russians have started. The Chinese have started. And I think if that's the way of the world, we should not be left behind. We should actually put in some effort and some energy, because you have to settle people's minds for them to go ahead. If you don't settle their minds, we are not likely to move ahead as quickly as we want to.
George, take us on a break on that as well. I mean, there's a bigger focus now on those 3 offices that we're talking about. We're talking about the CBK, we're talking about the presidency, and we're talking about that treasury office. Well, are you satisfied, George, fully that they've done whatever it is that they were supposed to do to their energy and to their efficacy to take us out of the COVID-19 pandemic and introduce us into a new year, 2021?
I think, Elijah, government, from my assessment,
Yes.
has not done their level best. They have tried here and there, Elijah, but they have not done their level best. When this pandemic hit our shores, Elijah, we already had figures from China. We already had figures from Europe on how likely it was going to affect the economy. So I would have expected government to have a clear guideline on how we are going to manage the economy vis-a-vis public health.
Yes.
I think that was not clear from the word go. Remember when the president announced what that is supposed to the impact of that in the economy and how they were going to mitigate that. For example, Elijah, when the government reduced VAT from 16 to 14%, definitely Treasury was going to lose money with that break. How was the government going to bridge in that break, given that they had budgeted, they had given out the budget figures that had been approved, Elijah? When you expect not to receive money, a given amount of money from your tax collection, yet you had budgeted for it, then you must come back and tell us, or you must put it down and say that we are going to bridge this gap by doing A, B, C, and D, so that you don't have, on one hand, giving brace, on the other hand, you have deficit. So I think it was, for me, there were knee-jerk reactions that were not well thought out into the future. Remember, Elijah, there's a time where in your show that you talked about in this pandemic, Treasury needs to sit down almost on a monthly basis to review their figures and review the efficacy of their policies. We didn't see that, Elijah, up to date. I think we've always seen press conferences only on public health alone, but not on the economy. And I can confidently say that, Elijah, the impact of this pandemic has been felt more on the economy, even more than the public health. So I think Treasury, the presidency, and even the Central Bank of Kenya have not done the maximum they should have done. They have done their what we call their bare minimum or the average, but we expected more from them in this pandemic period. Remember, Elijah, that our exchange rates currently are going to 111, 112, the lowest figures that we've seen in the recent past, and it might go up to 115. That might bring us what we call imported inflation into the economy. So I expect these are things that we can always review. So I expect 2021 government should have a bi-monthly meeting and a bi-monthly review of our economic figures, just to see how are our policies affected the economy. Is there anything they need to do to correct maybe the wrongs that we've done before, or to correct some negative impact of our policies in the economy, Elijah?
Pretty much what we're doing here on Business AM is going back in 2020 as we usher 2021. We take a short break here on Business AM. Once we come back, let's talk about the big elephant in the room. Debt. Why is it? Once we come back.